conference anchor for the next couple of days. The Caribbean Tourism Organization defines sustainable tourism as the optimal use of natural, cultural, social, and financial resources for national development on an equitable and self-sustaining basis in order to provide a unique visitor experience and an improved quality of life for host communities through partnership among government. As you heard earlier, everyone spoke about partnership among government, the private sector, and of course, communities. In looking at the issues impacting the sustainability of the Caribbean tourism industry, we believe it is important to embrace a holistic approach which takes into account the regional ability to maintain product quality, increase profitability, the empowerment of our people, and responsible use of natural and cultural heritage assets, enhanced with strong multi-sectoral partnerships to foster tourism sector competitiveness and resilience. As you heard this morning, the theme for this year's Sustainable Tourism Conference, the 5 Ps for a legacy of Caribbean tourism sustainability: people, planet, prosperity, purpose, and partnership, underscores the interconnectedness of investing in people, our responsibility to the planet, the need to ensure prosperity for all, to renew our commitment to make travel and tourism more purposeful and meaningful, underpinned by equitable public, private, and community partnerships. These 5 pillars represent for the Caribbean Tourism Organization and our member countries not only the cornerstones of sustainable tourism development, but are the guiding principles that can shape the destiny of our beautiful Caribbean region. As we gather to explore the intersections of sustainability, tourism, and Caribbean identity, let us seize this moment to urge you to forge new pathways towards a future where tourism serves as a force for positive change, benefiting both present and future generations. As we begin this first day of conference proceeding, I would like to share a few housekeeping announcements with you. For those of you who may not have already done so, please download the digital conference program. You should have seen the banner at the reception where you registered. You were able to use the QR code to download the conference program. If you haven't done so, when we break again, please do so. As part of our sustainability efforts, of course, we were seeking not to print, and therefore we have a digital conference program. We're trying to walk the talk, right? So please scan the QR code to access and download the conference program. I also want to invite everyone to review the full bios for the speakers and moderators via the conference website, www.caribbeanstc.com. And I'm saying this to you because today our moderators are not going to be in a position to read full bios for you of each of our speakers, but they will introduce them, and you can take your time when we have a break to look on the website to see the full bios of our speakers and moderators. As it relates to the conference sessions, please note that there will be an opportunity for questions and answers at the end of every session, okay? As a reminder, we're kindly asking conference delegates to be courteous when presentations are in session and to be respectful of differing views, which we will all have, including when addressing panelists during the Q&A segment. I also want to encourage you to interact with the exhibitors in the exhibition hall. There are various innovators, tourism solution providers, and sustainability initiatives that are being promoted and on display. Again, during our breaks, please do visit the exhibition hall and have a discussion with those who are out there to tell you a bit about what they're doing. And outside in the rotunda, we have a selection of local artisans, and we encourage you to go and purchase your tidbits. You know, we have a packed itinerary, and as much as you may want to say, I'm going to slip away and run down to town to do something, no, it's not possible. full out 3 days, okay? So we brought them to you, and they'll be in the rotunda for you to make your purchases. And we kindly ask that you place your mobile phones, please, on silent or vibrate, because as you could appreciate, it's, it gets quite disturbing for persons when they are presenting, and I know you will do this. So I want to say thank you to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now pleased to introduce the first panel. I want to invite them to join me, please, on the stage. Our first session focuses on the first P of planet. The topic is preserving paradise, nurturing nature for a sustainable future. And this session will be moderated by Ms. Maxine Welsh, Director of the Nature Conservancy Eastern Caribbean Division. And I want to invite Maxine and the panelists to come up on stage and join me, please. Maxine is a Grenadian, and she's an ecologist and water resource management and governance specialist. She's worked with various international organizations, including GIZ, UNDP, and RTI International in the areas of environmental sustainability, ecosystem restoration and conservation, coastal zone management, water resource management, climate action, and energy efficiency. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Welsh to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Earth Day. You'll be hearing a lot of that today, so get used to it. Thank you all for being here, and welcome to this important panel, which is quite, I would say, apt for the theme that we're celebrating today. Preserving nature, preserving paradise, nurturing nature for a sustainable future. Now, I want to borrow a bit from what Minister Thomas said earlier today, and I want you to stretch your imagination for a bit. You wouldn't have to stretch it too far. So picture this: sun, sea, and sand. Pristine beaches, lush rainforests, refreshing waterfalls, vibrant coral reefs. It's not a tourism ad. These are assets, natural wonders that bring millions of people to our shows every year. These same features, as you know, you should know, they're under increasing threat. Threats faced from climate change and threats to human activity. In this session, our esteemed experts will be discussing and presenting initiatives and strategies towards preserving these services for future use, recognizing their value and, of course, the urgent need to protect them. Now, some may say we've heard it all before. This is a conversation that we're all used to. However, it's not something that we can grow tired of. It's something that needs to persist. So, to get us going, I now invite our first panelist and featured speaker, Mr. Christopher Corbin. Mr. Corbin is a coordinator of the Cartagena Convention Secretariat's Ecosystem Division of the United Nations Environment Program. Mr. Corbin.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all. You know, when you have feature speaker or lead speaker attached to your name, that already throws a bit of a challenge, especially after those wonderful remarks we heard this morning. Please, another round of applause for the Prime Minister and Mr. Stewart. And I only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Let me make sure that this works. And starting off with a little story, and this might age me a little bit, but is this all we really have as a Caribbean region? One would argue, no, we've already heard of the importance of our people, the potential for sports, for medical, for health tourism, the importance of our culinary tourism. There are so many opportunities, but the reality is we still depend on the Caribbean Sea. That which, when I took a stroll this morning I saw the number of Grenadians taking an early morning bath. Many parts of the world can't benefit from that. And these resources are valuable, yet they are very much at risk, whether it be for tourism, whether it be for fisheries. We have a very small amount of the ocean space, but we have significant coastal and marine resources that we have to protect. And some of the global headlines that we've seen recently give us cause for concern. Whether or not it's sargassum, it's climate change, and the sargassum is not stopping anytime soon. How are we going to respond? What are we going to do about it? So let's take a little bit of a journey through the Caribbean Sea and put this presentation a bit into context. This is not my usual environment, so I had to do a bit of research. And here are 3 areas as part of the Caribbean Sustainable Tourism Policy: resource use and management, climate smart action, and risk resilience. I dare say all of our activities as we look to protect planet have to address 3 out of these 7. What are some of the environmental challenges we are facing? We are facing loss of biodiversity, climate change, weak governance, our laws, our institutions, our policies, pollution, and overfishing. Let's get back to the dollars and cents. We are sitting on a gold mine of resources that continues to provide revenue, whether it be from tourism, from fisheries, but also from coastal protection, areas that we need to consider as we consider climate change. So how are we doing? I hate to say, not very well. A recent report that we did as UNEP showed that a number of beaches in the Caribbean are polluted. They are polluted from sewage, they're polluted from agrochemical runoff, some more so than others. We know what happens after heavy rainfall, and we see the amount of garbage and plastics coming down our rivers into the marine environment. We need to do better in terms of our pollution control and mitigation. Images that none of us from in or outside of the tourism sector want to see. Do you know that the Caribbean was declared a special area under one of those international agreements that actually prohibits the discharge of any plastics from ships into the Caribbean Sea? Is it still happening? Possibly. The Caribbean was reported to be the biggest polluter per capita of plastics. And the Caribbean Sea is second only to the Mediterranean in terms of floating microplastics. And as we would say, we have a problem, but a problem that is preventable. Our biodiversity has declined and degraded. We talked about the importance of coral reefs and mangroves and seagrass beds, but the trends show that these continue to decline. We continue to have deforestation. We continue to have impacts on the natural resources on which we depend. And if you get at the specific level to reinforce the point about partnerships, it is all connected. Whether or not the pollution is coming from garbage or sewage or agriculture doesn't really matter, because they are resultants in some cases because of general public behavior, in some cases private sector behavior, in some cases reflective of institutional deficiencies. These impact our environment, our planet, and these then impact the very economic sectors that we depend upon. Again, at stake, fisheries, dive tourism, coastal protection, millions of dollars that we have to spend to fix the problem instead of preventing it in the first place. What is UNEP doing? And UNEP is really focused on promoting sustainable tourism. Again, I want to thank the organizers, the themes, and the partnerships in terms of what we are focusing on is extremely critical. The reality is business as usual is not a solution. We project increases in energy, in greenhouse gases, in water consumption, and in solid waste disposal. We need to define a new way of doing business for the sector that's more in harmony with nature. We as a Regional Seas program based in Jamaica, I must admit it's a long way to come to actually hear Mr. Stewart present in person, but I will certainly be following up when I'm back in Kingston. And the framework of this regional agreement is that we need regional cooperation. Cooperation, why? Because whether or not it's hurricane, Sahara dust, microplastics, invasive species, nutrients, and sargassum, They do not originate in the Caribbean, nor do they end in the Caribbean. We need to look for collaboration both at the regional and at the global level. And as we explore these new buzzwords, ocean economy, blue economy, and how we exploit, explore, and maximize on those benefits, we have to realize that the tourism sector plays a critical role in that, in protecting, restoring, and regenerating our coastal systems, in delivering equitable and inclusive. Thank you, PM and Mr. Stewart, for reinforcing that. That is so critical. We need to ensure climate stability, resilience, change our throwaway mentality. This is about consumption, production, and we need to start thinking more in terms of circular economy. Tools are out there. Are we using them? Maybe not as much as we could. Again, buzzwords, maybe, but they are tools that will allow us to do better planning, to do better assessments of our ecosystems, to employ some of the processes that will ensure that we are sustainable, we act sustainably, and we are not just talking about it. So ultimately, and we heard this morning, it's the balance. We are small islands, limited land space, limited resources. We're trying to get to that sweet spot in the middle, maximizing environment, economic benefits, as well as social benefits to ensure that any economic development agenda is one that is sustainable. And the tourism sector and its products form a critical part of that. So what do we need to do? And we talked about, this is about solutions. This is about call for actions. I didn't even know that there were all of these certification schemes in the sector. The opportunities are there. It wasn't mentioned this morning, but I understand just earlier this year, Sanders was recognized in terms of the Green Fins for their efforts. And this is something that needs to transform across all of the industry. There are a number of manuals and guidelines, some of which even many of you may have been involved in developing on coral reef restoration, on mangrove restoration. And I want to highlight in particular the partnership that we had with the Caribbean Tourism Organization to share best practices within and among the sector. We don't do a very good job of doing that. We have, as was said this morning, the intellectual expertise and experience and knowledge, and we are not sharing, and in fact, sometimes importing things which don't work. So collectively and as a partnership, we need to influence the government policy. We need to promote pollution reduction strategies and technologies. We need to promote best management practices. Stop focusing on end of pipe. It's about prevention at source, which is preventable. How do we bring in the researchers, our young early career ocean professionals? Again, our Prime Minister mentioned marine biologists, and I would extend that, oceanographers, chemists. We need to look for solutions that are homegrown and applicable. And then we look at the whole aspect of corporate social responsibility and how does this partnership be meaningful. It doesn't have to be a win-lose. It has to be a win-win. So with that, I hope this has hopefully set the stage a little bit for my other esteemed panelists, and thank you also for the gender equity. This is what gender equity, folks, is really about. Please, a round of applause. This is gender equity. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Corbin. Now, I consider myself a mermaid. I like to say that I was born with salt water in my veins, in the sea. You would find me there as a child. It was a struggle for my parents to get me out of the water, always in there. So it's quite painful to hear about our contributions to ocean plastics, to hear about the pollution runoff, agricultural runoff. But again, I will say this is nothing new to any of you in this room. And yet it's a conversation that must continue. Thank you, Mr. Corbin. I'd now like to introduce our second speaker, Ms. Maria Fowell, Senior Technical Specialist of the Tourism Economic Development Unit of the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States Commission from St. Lucia. Ms. Fowell.
Happy Earth Day. No, we can do better than that. Happy Earth Day. Good. So, isn't it wonderful for us to be, it's quite an honor, thank you to CTO, to be on a panel, a planet panel on Earth Day, so amazing. Thank you, thank you. I'm delighted to be in Grenada, and it's always a pleasure to be in Grenada. Many of you may not know, but our new chair of the OECS Council of Ministers of Tourism is Grenada. So I'm happy to be here on this first occasion when Grenada takes the chair. So I'm told that this is, yeah, got it right. So I'm very proud of all of my OECS countries. And yeah, I can say that, my OECS countries. Yeah. They have all been involved in initiatives and events that impact on sustainability and vice versa. The last Sustainable Tourism Conference was held in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in 2019. And in May, Antigua and Barbuda will host the 4th SIDS conference. In October, St. Lucia is the venue for the Red Lac 2024 Congress, which is hosted by the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund and the St. Lucia National Conservation Fund. Dominica has done tremendous work and continues to do work on climate resilience. There are several hotels within the OECS, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, Martinique, Guadeloupe, that are all Green Globe certified, and many of them for 5 and 10 years. So it's not anything new. With the endorsement of the OECS member states, we signed the Glasgow Declaration of Climate Action in Tourism, and we're working towards the implementation of its obligations. So the OECS countries individually and collectively are making their contribution to sustainability in a significant way. I want to talk a little bit about tourism and the environment, since I have the pleasure of being the tourism person on the panel. And, you know, in our region, and specifically in the OECS, there is a very heavy dependency on tourism. The share of tourism receipts as a percentage of exports in the OECS countries are among the highest in the world. And the OECS average is well over and above that of the rest of the Caribbean, the rest of CARICOM, standing at 57%. So much of the OECS employment also relies on tourism, from the lowest at 35%, which is Dominica, to the highest, which is Antigua, which is at 90%. So there is a great reliance on tourism. And tourism and the environment are intrinsically linked. Tourism depends on the environment, and tourism can also be a reason to protect the environment. And I know some of the environmentalists will say, really? Yeah, but if we plan properly, we can manage that impact that tourism may have on the environment in terms of overcrowding, waste management, excessive water use, energy use, and the overuse of natural resources. So environmental stewardship is something that we're becoming a little more familiar with in the tourism sector, but there's still much work to be done. Sustainable tourism involves all the Ps. We are dealing with all of them this week. And whilst for the minute we focus on the planet, we must consider the economic pillar, so the prosperity relative to the planet. Is the economic earnings that stays in country enough to meet all of the demands and the negative impacts of the environment? So this is just one food for thought. The OECS is in the process of doing a new sustainable tourism policy, and this work we've had extensive consultations on, and there are some important environmental considerations that are high on the agenda: coral reef restoration, coastal erosion, built heritage. There's quite a bit that is high on the agenda on the environmental side. So the new policy, our existing policy dates back to 2011, so the new policy will address the areas that the old policy lacked the emphasis on. So Agenda 2030, climate action in tourism, crisis and disaster reduction, the blue economy. So with a focus on renewable energy, waste management, plastic pollution, and biodiversity. Now, don't get me wrong, we're not just dealing with the environmental side, but we're on a planet panel today. I'll just skip very quickly. The OECS has a sustainable environmental unit. There are a number of initiatives that are ongoing. We have several projects that deal with responses to environmental concerns. Recycle OECS was in response to plastic pollution. Biospace is another project that seeks to address biodiversity issues, and quite a bit of training has gone on there. Okay, let me just skip forward to the next. And we also have done quite a lot of work on ocean governance. We do have an ocean governance unit. So let me just, before I close, the three things that the OECS would like to focus on is to empower communities, to protect the environment, collaborate on collective good, measuring the impact of sustainable tourism. And empowering the communities, we know that if whatever, the visitors will follow what the national culture is. So if we protect our environments, the visitors will do so too. Collaboration for the collective good. We heard quite a bit of that this morning with the Prime Minister as well as Mr. Stewart. And I think that we all know that this is what needs to be done. We need to stop working in silos. Tourism needs to work with environment. Environment needs to work with tourism. And definitely we see in the OECS space, there is the opportunity to do that based on the structure of our organization. We've already had a joint senior officials meeting between tourism and the environment, and hopefully later on in the year, we will have a joint ministerial meeting between tourism and the environment to be able to continue these dialogues. And then finally, the measuring the impact of tourism, the need for evidence-based decision-making on how tourism supports or doesn't support the environment. You know, there's a lot of talk about large hotels, cruise ships, carrying capacity, but do we have the data and the research to really appreciate what it is? And I think that the Caribbean is in a good position to build up to 2027, the UN's International Year of Sustainable and Resilient Tourism. And as I have to close, I'm going to close with a quote from our Director General and Dr. Didicus Jules. So on Earth Day 2024, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States reaffirms its dedication to sustainable tourism and environmental preservation. Our collective efforts are crucial in maintaining the beauty and biodiversity of our islands. By prioritizing sustainability in every action, we commit to protecting our paradise for future generations. Together, let us honor Earth Day every day, ensuring a lasting legacy of mindful tourism and conservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fowell. Empowerment, measuring the impact of sustainable tourism. Because of course we understand in our region how heavily we depend on tourism. Mr. Stewart mentioned it in his speech, how hard we were hit by COVID. We live in the Caribbean, we live on the hurricane belt. I lived through Hurricane Ivan, and I recall seeing how bare the mountains looked after Hurricane Ivan, the day after, which was the 8th of September, 2004. We depend on it. And if we want to speak about building a resilient tourism sector, we also have to speak on how tourism can help build resilient countries. With that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Giselle Carr, Head of Brand and Communications at Inplanet, Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you so much, Maxine, and thank you everyone for having me. So today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the work that I do with my company Inplanet, and I would also like to talk to you a little bit about legacy. First, a little bit about the company, then the wider context. As Maxine said, I'm the head of brand and communications for Inplanet, which is a carbon dioxide removal company. And if you don't know what carbon dioxide removal is, it's the deliberate removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And it's based on the premise that our planet is essentially unlivable and that we have to take pretty drastic action to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. I'll talk a little bit about the process and about the impact we've had so far. But really, I want to bring things home back to the Caribbean and speak about brand and solution. Yes? So a little bit about the company. We're a German-based, impact-driven climate tech company. And predominantly, our activities are in Brazil, specifically the Sao Paulo region. But because we work with farmers on regenerative agriculture, and we're the only one to do so at scale in the tropics, it has implications across the board for tropical agriculture. Our mission is to enable farmers in the tropics to remove CO2 from the atmosphere and move towards regenerative agricultural processes and practices. And our vision is to sequester gigatons, as in billions of tons, of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through using these regenerative tropical agricultural practices. And it's also to create an ecosystem where nutritious and healthy food is provided for generations to come. So in fact, not that different from us here in the Caribbean. Our team is global, and yes, I might be the only person based in the Caribbean for now, based in Trinidad and Tobago, but truly we are global and we are quite unified around this mission because we realize it affects everyone on Earth. We are very fortunate to have some of the most prestigious scientists in the world working with us on this very specific technology called enhanced rock weathering. So a little bit about the context and the need for carbon removal, which I spoke about before. And you'll forgive me if my voice quivers a bit, but the reality is that we need to remove about 200 years worth of carbon dioxide in the next 70 years. That's the truth. And it's important that we take those steps immediately and that we get ambitious and that we really just open wide the doors of our hearts and imaginations to take those steps. And that's about as far as we've gotten, the very small dot. But it is progress, right? It is something. So again, to secure this livable planet, we need to really be as ambitious as we can and invest in the most scalable, durable, and safe carbon removal technology that's available. Enhanced rock weathering is in fact based on a natural process known as rock weathering. So when the rain falls on mountains, it actually dissolves small amounts of rock, and what happens is that that rock dissolves CO2. And so when it runs down into the land, it actually it reduces acidification in the ocean, and it also regenerates the soils. Now, this is a process that might take thousands of years, right? Millions of years even. And the science that we are using, which is enhanced rock weathering, really reduces that time to a decade or less. So we're attempting to do 30 years of climate change science and mitigation within 10 years. A little bit about the process. So it is the most durable and nature-based carbon dioxide removal solution to date. The carbon is stored for thousands of years, and because we are based in Brazil, there's a level of scalability that exists, not only for our activities, but the IP development and the technique refinement, I would say. And again, it's safe. The beauty of our impact so far is that we've affected, so far, dozens of farmers, working with them very closely to improve the yield of their land, but also to help them remove CO2 from the atmosphere using these regenerative practices. And you could see the numbers really speak for themselves, but this was only 2023. And every year, I would say every day, we're getting more and more partners and always looking for more, of course. So I want to take a moment here to talk a little bit about my own work with the company. When I started, we didn't have a brand, essentially, last year. And we had to basically create it from scratch. For those of you who follow Sir David Attenborough, one of my favorite quotes of his is that climate change is now a communications issue. As unfortunate as that is, that's the truth. We know, correct? Which means we're really not landing with our communications. We're not hitting. And what I want to impress upon everyone today is that brands ultimately create legacy. It's a deeply powerful position to have, and one that we have to take with a level of seriousness and love. As a company, we have a level of potential, but also I think that we have to really curate that brand with a level of care and understanding. So brands in the era of climate change need to be disruptive. We need to understand a level of healthy urgency. We need to, co-create in a way that is transparent, and we need to have a level of rigor. At Inplanet, we actually work with a diverse range of creative professionals, several of whom are in the Caribbean. Some are actually in Brazil itself and across Europe and the Americas. And I'm pleased to say that last year we worked on this rebrand of the company, and I dare say it is a scalable brand. Yes? One of these people I actually want to spotlight, this person here, Tanya Marie Williams-Rule. And I want to spotlight her in a very specific way because creative professionals also bring legacy to life. And the reason I want to spotlight Tanya is because we met over a decade ago, and by circumstance and by fortune, we were both part of the team that worked on Pure Grenada. Now, I dare say 10 years later, such a legacy has been created from this brand. It is incredible to see what Grenada has done and how Grenada walks the talk. And I have to spotlight Tanya because we just worked on the rebrand of Inplanet as well. So truly anything is possible, but Grenada is living proof that legacy, that kind of thing. Thank you. No, it's a big deal. It's a big deal because it's about shifting minds and hearts, and the behavior change is truly what is needed for all of this to move forward. So again, brands must continue to adapt, and while products might be created in a factory, brands are created in the mind, and I would go so far as to say it's created in the heart as well, yes? So now that we're entering this era of climate uncertainty, we have to ask ourselves, now that we can do almost anything, what will we do? I believe that we could be part of the solution. So if it's from a carbon dioxide removal perspective, what that solution looks like is calculating the hardest to abate emissions and looking again at those 2030 climate goals for your company or your organization. Obviously, designing what is personalized for your own company and brand, and then achieving those net zero goals. But from a brand perspective, it's about adaptation, understanding this very healthy level of urgency that is now needed, and crafting campaigns that get to the heart of the matter, that truly speak to the heart, because that's what we need. We need a sea change. And then, of course, we need to renew our initiatives and strategies to meet the challenge at the right level. Thank you.
Thank you, Giselle. Be disruptive. You may want to choose your words carefully, because I'm sure there are some very disruptive people here, myself included. Because, for example, those who know me well will say, whenever we think pure Grenada, I'm a Grenadian, pure Grenada. But at first, we must ensure that it remains pure. If it's not pure, what are we selling? What exactly is the product that we are advertising if it's not pure? There was an article a couple weeks ago that mentioned Grenada was number 7, I believe, in the world for clean air. So when I hear about initiatives like this, it gives me hope, and maybe we are on the right path. And to look at actually natural solutions for problems that we have, that is the journey that we need to take, and we are having the right conversations, and it's something that we need to continue to do. I will now call on our final speaker and friend, Ms. Rosana John, attorney at law at Denton, Delany, another Grenadian. Rosana.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning. By raise of hands, how many of you have heard about corporate social responsibility, CSR? Okay. And by further raise of hands, how many of you have heard about ESG, environmental, I'm a bit nervous, social governance? Far less hands. So Petra has asked us to be real today, and we want to step away from the buzzwords. We're saying that we're eco-friendly, we're green, but what do these terms really mean? So my presentation today is for the corporate leaders. It's how do we operationalize sustainability in our businesses? How do we make it real? How do we talk the talk? So what is ESG and why is it important? ESG is a set of standards used to measure an organization's impact on people and planet. So it is something tangible, it is something measurable. And how is this different from CSR? The main difference, although they cover broadly the same area, is that ESG goes to the core of the organization, whereas CSR tends to be ancillary or external. So for example, a hotel that has a foundation that donates books or plants trees, that's part of their CSR program. But what are they doing internally? How much plastic have they recycled? How efficient are they from an energy perspective? From 2020 to 2024, have they reduced it by what percentage? We're speaking about concrete things. So ESG refers to a framework for sustainability. It is measurable, quantifiable, verifiable, and reportable. So it has KPIs. It's not the warm and fuzzy, oh, we're green, or we're eco. What does this actually mean? So these are headlines from actual news screenshots that I have collated, and we see that ESG is becoming another buzzword. It is in a lot of headlines. It is in most places, but we don't fully understand what it means. But one of the things that is coming is mandatory reporting, meaning that you have to do it. And of course, this is happening in the wider world, but we know here in the Caribbean that we are impacted by what happens outside. So I am not saying that mandatory ESG reporting is coming to this region today or tomorrow, but it is on the horizon and it is something that we should be aware of. And these are headlines specifically for the hospitality industry. We see that in the EU, there is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. Hotels of a certain size can be captured by this law. We have more eco-conscious guests. We're told that Gen Z is the most conscious generation so far. They care about where they are staying and what are the practices of the hotel itself, and not just what the hotel is doing externally. And then we see that ESG is a challenge. I'm not going to tell you it's a simple thing to implement and that it can be done in 1, 2, 3. So it is a challenge, and today we're just going to go through briefly how it can be adopted. So when it comes to the hospitality realm, what do ESG considerations look like? So from the environmental perspective, we're speaking about things such as water conservation, energy efficiency, carbon emissions, waste reduction. From a social perspective, we're speaking about your supply chain and procurement. Where are the things that you are offering in your hotel coming from? How do you treat your people? In Grenada, we're currently at a stage of minimum wage, but there's also the concept of living wage. How are we treating our people? Then we have governance. How is your organization governed? How transparent are your processes? How diverse is your management board? How ethical are you? And are you adhering to the local laws of the land? So this is not an exhaustive list, but it is an example of some of the things that touch and concern it. And then what gets measured gets managed. We need standards. Has anybody in here ever tried to track their meals? So the doctor asks you how many calories a day are you eating or how many meals, and you might just estimate, 3 meals, 2,000 calories. But have you actually tried to track it? Have you considered the handful of nuts you take in between or the bite of a friend's sandwich? By the time those things add up, you're eating a lot more than you think you are. So it's important to measure and to track. So when you say you are sustainable, can you say how many pounds of plastic you have recycled? Can you say how much kilowatts of electricity you have reduced between this year and that year? So it's about being concrete. So when it comes to ESG and hospitality, there are 2 main areas that are important. So the first one is certifications with respect to the building itself. So certain standards such as the LEED and the BREEAM are some of those standards. So in terms of how the building is designed, in terms of ventilation and so forth. And then you have in terms of how the hotel itself is operated. And I know several hotels in Grenada are Green Globe certified. We also have Earth Check and the GSTC. I know some hotels in Grenada do follow these standards. So more should be doing so. And at a point, it should be mandatory that some sort of standard is followed. So in terms of why adopt ESG when you don't have to? There are no laws saying you have to report, you have to measure, you have to recycle. Currently, we do not have that in place in Grenada or most of the islands covered by the CTO. ESG is introspective. You have to understand your organization. You have to understand how much you're using and so forth, so it causes you to be more efficient. So yes, implementing certain technologies can be expensive, but it does cause you to reduce how much you consume. Of course, it has reputational benefits. Everybody wants to be associated with what's sustainable and what's green. We have first mover advantage because, as I keep saying, it's not mandatory currently. But if you voluntarily take that on, you can be a leader in the space. And what is becoming most popular is financing. ESG has evolved in the global market space. It's factors that investors look at when they're investing in a business, and also banks. So you're seeking a loan to expand your hotel. The bank would want to know, have you factored in climate change risks? What are you doing to secure their investment at the end of the day? So ESG factors are becoming more and more relevant in seeking financing. So what are the risks if you do not consider ESG in your operations? You have operational inefficiencies. You have no idea of the data, how your organization is running, because ESG is very data-driven. Numbers, numbers, numbers. You have non-compliance and greenwashing. You're using terminology and you cannot back it up. So everybody likes to say they're eco-looks and they're eco-friendly and they're green, but at the end of the day, how clean are your operations really and truly? And that, of course, causes reputational damage if you are exposed that you are not backing up your claims. And of course, market competitiveness. Why should we invest in your business as compared to the other? So how do we go about actually starting an ESG journey? The first thing is to switch on the right corporate mindset, being aware that this is an issue that should be a priority for your organization, doing an audit. Every organization is different. What are the E, environmental, S, social, and governance issues affecting my business? And then to develop a strategy as part of your wider corporate strategy. Most businesses have a general strategy. It should include ESG factors as well. Establishing a management system that allows you to assess your performance. Communicating to shareholders. So for instance, and stakeholders. We have some hotels and other businesses that report. So you go onto their website and you can read their report, not just the annual report that speaks about the financials, but that speaks about how they are performing on an ESG level. And of course, if you don't know where to start, consult an ESG professional who can assist you in your journey. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rosana, for your presentation. And as you're speaking, there was one thing that was going through my head, walking the walk. We talk about it, but what are you actually doing? How transparent are your processes, diverse management, your ethics? How clean are your operations? It's all good and lovely to put it out there and market, but what are you actually doing when we come and knock on your back door and have a look? So, unfortunately, due to time constraints, we may not be able to entertain a full question and answer segment. So, to pivot, what I will do is ask the panelists a general question, and then each of you will have an opportunity to answer briefly, please, before they start playing the Oscars music to get us off the stage. So, tourism discussion, tourism conference on Earth Day, a panel such as this. My question to you. Tourism is often a double-edged sword for natural environments. How can we strike a balance between attracting visitors and protecting the very ecosystems that draw them in? No, I sent you guys these questions last night, so you should be prepared. Should I ask it again?
I can start.
Okay.
Okay, so I think it's about balance, but it's also about the type of visitors that you're trying to attract. There are going to be some visitors that are more environmentally conscious. We spoke about the younger generation, that is definitely so. So it may also be about, in striking that balance, seeing how we can increase the demand for the visitor that is more environmentally conscious. So it may mean changing the marketing, it may mean targeting a different audience, but I believe that there is a balance that you can strike.
Thank you, Ms. Fowell. Any of the other panelists? Giselle? You can switch mics.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, much to what you're saying, actually, I really believe that tourism is built on an idea that people are, in some way, they're trying to escape reality, right? They're trying to enter a new reality, they're coming to the Caribbean, they want to see something new and different, right? Something that's refreshing. But I would say, in a way, the double-edged sword, it might be not a myth exactly, but I think we could just be honest and say, actually, we prefer to have you here and welcome you here in this particular way because we want you to keep coming for generations, for many, many decades to come. And we don't want to do that at the expense of our environment. And there are some really unique art and technology installations I've seen across Europe. I'm thinking of one that a colleague of mine worked on for the city of Berlin, and they actually let people come into an immersive experience and showed them what the city was like if it was a carbon cycle city. And so it was showcasing potential biological technologies that people could use rather than have this negative impact on the environment. And I think that there's no end to things that we could dream up like this. Obviously, we're in the biodiversity superpower of the world. So I think it's more about reframing. It's more about reframing.
Thank you. Any of our other panelists? Rosana?
Hi. So as a lawyer, of course, I'm going to speak about the
Well, your
law.
voice is projecting, but maybe you want to switch mics a bit?
So impressive.
Or everybody could hear her?
Hello? Thanks. So yes, so as a lawyer, naturally, I'm going to speak about the role of law and legislation in terms of striking that balance. Grenada does have a sustainability development plan, as do most islands, but are we enforcing it? Is it legislated in any way? We tend to live in 5-year election cycles. So in terms of sticking to our promises, sticking to our sustainable development goals, that has to transcend the different political parties. Another thing is that we need to take ownership of our tourism product. So in terms of having a policy, what I have noticed is that developers come to us and tell us what they want to build here. We should have a policy where we are saying, these are the types of persons we are trying to attract. These are the types. So we are leading what we want to be built here. So I think that's very, very important.
Fighting words, if I say so myself. Mr. Corbin?
Disruptive, you said, right?
Ms. Carr, disruptive.
Prueba, uno, dos, tres. We have to speak more than one language, but anyway, we need to understand that and admit that tourism has been part of the problem and still is part of the problem when it comes down to environmental sustainability. But I think more importantly for the audience here, they have to be part of the solution. Now, for me, that means that we all have to be at the table. All of the interest, we have to take ownership, I think, as you mentioned. And I think collectively, the environmentalists too have to listen to understand and not just to react. If you say no, what's the option? How can I do this better to ensure longer-term sustainability on what we depend on, what we have out there? So, yeah, we all have to come to the table. Let's discuss, let's understand, and let's also evolve our own thinking and responses to the evolving market. It's not the way it was 20 years ago, both in the environment and in the industry. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you to my incredibly disruptive panel. Thank you. Striking a balance. Ownership of our tourism product, partnerships, enforcement of our policies and strategies. Some of the key takeaways. We have to recognize, of course, that the health of our planet is tied not just to our life, but also our various sectors. And this session, this panel, goes beyond awareness. This conference should go beyond networking and engagement. I would like to borrow from a jingle I heard on the radio the other day. I'm following in the steps of our Prime Minister, Mr. Stewart. I'm throwing away my script. The jingle said, tourism is your business, tourism is my business. Of course it is. It is our business. But so too are the needs of our environment, especially when it comes to protecting it. These conversations need to go beyond just basic conversations. They need to result in tangible solutions and practical interventions for conserving our natural resources. We need to inspire a paradigm shift when it comes to environmental stewardship. It is only then that we can ensure that we work together to create a sustainable future. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me again in thanking our moderator and our panelists. 1 P down, 4 more P's to go. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so as we try to catch up, that's what we're doing right now, playing catch up without, necessarily taking away time from our presenters and discussion. And we do apologize for not being able to do our Q&A just now. But thank you, Madam Moderator, for still getting a question in there for our panelists to tackle for us. We're going on now to our next session, focusing on the people side and looking at the topic of breaking barriers, building bridges, harnessing equity, education, and empowerment in tourism. Ladies and gentlemen, this session will be moderated by Richard Young, Fashion Director and Creative Consultant of Richard Young, Inc. And I want to invite Richard and the panelists to please join me on stage. And while they're doing that, let me just tell you a little bit about your moderator. Richard is a prolific persona with a wealth of experience spanning over 30 years of consistent, high-caliber event management, production, design, and creative direction practice. He has become a much sought-after creative strategist in the region and the diaspora, more so with his avid advocacy of our Caribbean aesthetic. I now invite Mr. Richard Young to the podium. Welcome him and the panelists, everyone.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Richard Young, and I am very, very delighted to be here. I am exhilarated to be here. I feel that the universe has answered my call because I am a people person, and everything I have done so far in my life is about harnessing that talent, corralling people, trying to change the narrative of how we perceive ourselves in post-colonial Caribbean space. And so I work in fashion, and I work with creatives, and I'm about brand identity. And I always feel that we need to work collectively and that we not stay working in silos, which we seem to always do, either in island silos or in spaces within an island in silos. But we need to communicate with each other to create this collective brand identity. I have the honor of having a very eclectic panel coming from academia, senior lecturer, dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences, Dr. Akula Lewis Cameron. I have as well Christopher Lee. When I first saw his name, I said, oh my God, Christopher Lee is here. But no, this is a creative practitioner par excellence who works in recruitment for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I think he's now based in Canada. We also have Tony Broder, and she has worked in gender equity in Fiji, in South Africa, and she is part of the I have to get a thing. I'm trying to be so ad-lib because I don't want to use notes. But she works in the Caribbean space, bringing us together, working with not only gender equity, but development studies. And she's going to bring that to bear on how we use our people-centric approaches to change and dynamize how we represent ourselves. Then we have Amrita Bala of AB Consulting, And she herself has worked in luxury hospitality. And so she is also going to share a little bit about that. And she has worked in Thailand, in India, around the world. So we have a very, very eclectic bunch of persons here. And I feel we are going to raise an awareness of how we, as the people, affect all the P's, and at the end of which we'll have pride and prestige in our space. So I bring, first of all, I wasn't given an order, so I'm just going to pick people. Well, is the order this way here? Because yes, so good. So I'm going to bring Tony first on to speak on her contribution to the importance of the people in changing the narrative of sustainable tourism.
Thank you so much. And I also want to say that Melanie Sia from the St. Kitts Tourism Organization is with us. I do not like to stand between people and food, so I will be as quick as I can be because it is critical for us to discuss this P of people. Now, the United Nations, and I work for the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment. My name is Tawny Broadbent, and I am the representative of that organization. So, I wanted to start off with some basics about what we are and what we do. The United Nations actually came up with these 5 Ps. It's part of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, and there's a bit of a difference between these Ps and our 5 Ps, because we have peace instead of purpose, but I think they're interconnected. I may be a bit biased when I say this particular P may be the most important, speaking to something my mother has consistently told me, which is focus on where your sphere of influence and control is. And if people aren't doing things differently, we won't have the planet, we won't have the partnership, we won't have the prosperity, and we won't have peace. So at UN Women, we work on 4 main areas: ending violence against women and girls. We work on women's economic empowerment. We work on issues related to governance and participation in public life. And we also work on peace and security. And it was interesting because I work at the UN. So when I hear that the Caribbean is a peaceful space, I sometimes think, I think we have the potential to be a peaceful space. But right now, 46% of women who have ever been in a relationship in the Caribbean have experienced some form of violence in their life. We have a region that is extremely beautiful, but we have more deaths than countries that are at war. So, our tourism product, when we're thinking about the people, we can't only think about the people who come to visit. We need to think about the people who are here and who are serving those who come to visit. And a difference, given our history, which we have to acknowledge, between service and servitude, which does not necessarily always seem reflected in those who are in service. So at UN Women and across the UN agencies, we work on achieving these goals through partnership, through technical assistance, sometimes through innovative programming. And I'll speak to you about some of these innovative programming when I come to it. But one of the things I like to address immediately, because we always seem to think we are on the same page when we speak about sex and gender, and we see what's happening in your parliaments. We work with many of your parliaments. Sex is biological. There are 3. If you watch the Olympics, you know that they're intersex people, they're males, and they're females. The science is consistently changing, but this is what the biology tells us. Gender is what are the different social roles associated with sex. Women happen to bear children. Does that mean that we're more caring, we are weaker, should be in the homes? It becomes the stereotypes aligned to the roles assigned to what it means to be a female and what it means to be a male. Also, gender identity. Tourism is the industry in the Caribbean that hires most of the people from the LGBTQ+ community who suffered extremely when we had the COVID-19 pandemic. Sexual orientation is different than gender identity. We can have a conversation about it. Find me in the halls. Intersectionality. Not all women are the same. Diversity of perspective. One of your former panelists went to my high school. We have different lives in terms of how we got there, but to a certain extent, you may be hearing a similar story because we have a similar outlook. Many of our leaders happen to have parents who were politicians. How do we get that diversity of perspective? Or business owners. How do we get that diversity of perspective so that we can ensure that equity and equality, and I know everybody's been speaking about it, this is a fabulous visual that was on Facebook going around. Really what we want is eventually for the fence to change. And that's the work that the UN does, and that's the work hopefully that you're also doing in tourism. If you're trying to change the way things are done, for that last question asked, how can we make sure tourism is creating a planet that prospers, a resilient future, if you will? You have to do it by changing and understanding why things were done and how can we do them in a more effective way. And that leads to the issue of empowerment. We speak about empowerment all the time, and a lot of the men who I have a fantastic opportunity to speak to think that the work I do is about making women take over the world and emasculating men. That is not what empowerment is about, and that's not what women's empowerment is about. It never has been. And if anybody tells you that, they are a false prophet of feminism and gender equality. We're talking about having strengthened access to make decisions, having the skill sets to make those decisions effectively. Dignity. Dignity is at the root of service versus servitude. Social protections. If you lose your job, what happens? If the hurricane comes, and they come almost every year. It's a hurricane, it's flooding, it's something. Where are the social protections? How are governments positioning themselves? How are companies positioning themselves, whether it's ESG or not? Access to justice, and that skill set I spoke to before. So let's get to the data, because that's something that we at the UN consistently do. We try to tell you who is where. When we looked at the data, Jamaica has one of the strongest statistical institutes in the Caribbean, Statin. 6 in 10 creative jobs lost in Jamaica, lost during the pandemic, were held by women. One of the things is that there's not consistency across the board in how tourism statistics are collected in countries. Most of these women were in the tourism industry. How can we ensure that in data collection you can compare across countries where the women, where the men, what are they doing? If we get to the business owners, because we're not only looking at the people who work in hotels, we're talking about the people who provide services, who provide products to the hotels. In the Caribbean, of the formal business owners, and Adam Stewart spoke to this, we know that we have many more informal business owners. Of the formal business owners, most of them, 9% of them are women. Only 9%, or 8% rather, are women. Of that 8%, 1% has employees. Where's the resilience in this? Where's the investability in this? Afri-Exim Bank, CAF Bank, CDB, trying to invest in business owners. If the only person in the business is one person, where is the longevity and sustainability for many of you in this? And we speak a lot about the fact that women are graduating from our tertiary education institutions the most. They are. But that is not actually translating into jobs. So why are we across the Caribbean still looking at labor forces that are majority male and uncertified? What is happening to make sure that these women aren't getting access? And that's why we're thinking, if we're looking at economic empowerment, if we're looking at the people, you need to start thinking about your supply chains. Where are you getting your procurement from? How are you supporting micro? Because the majority of the businesses in the Caribbean are micro. How are you supporting these micro businesses? How are you not only supporting them in terms of their sustainability, but their ability to be sustainable in terms of the planet specifically? We've been working a lot now with financial institutions so that they're investing in women-owned businesses and understanding that if a woman calls for a loan, why are you asking which male family member will sign with her? That actually happened to me last month. And when I asked a further question, if they also ask men this, immediately the loan was approved. So I I will be following up on that. But these are things that consistently happen to women. For your businesses as well, are you an enabling workforce? Do you have parental leave for fathers and mothers? Many of you, the beautiful isle of, I won't say, many of you have circumstances where a domestic violence situation finds itself at a hotel's doorstep. We have, unfortunately, an issue with blurred lines in the Caribbean. Sex tourism is a huge issue in the Caribbean. I'm just saying issue. I'm not saying good or bad, I'm saying issue. But when we don't have an understanding of how gender relations can be healthy, and a young man is trying to be an effective waiter or an effective server, and he thinks the only way he should do that is to flirt, because he doesn't know how to engage with women in any other way, that affects your tourism product. So, I hear my line, I'm just going to say, we have a lot of work and we'd like to speak to you. I have two colleagues who are here. We've been doing incredible work in Grenada, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines in particular, with regards to the Build Back Equal projects supported by the Government of Canada, where we're training women entrepreneurs and supporting the training of hoteliers through our new partnership with CTO, who have just signed on to the Women's Empowerment Principles, to ensure that we can address some of these blurred lines and create an environment where Caribbean people choose to be in the tourism industry and serve with dignity in a sustainable way for our countries to be able to best thrive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. I love the whole change the way we look at things and the things we look at change, I felt was the most powerful thing coming out of that, and how gender relations impact in our tourism space. I think I grew up always hearing about sustainability as one thing and tourism as one thing, and where I come from, tourism is not as it is in the other Caribbean spaces that I go to. Trinidad, shouldn't say something like this, but we are not as tourist-oriented in our way of communicating. It is true. You know, I don't know if we got arrogant because of oil and gas in the past, but we lived not like what I meet when I go into other spaces. When I come north of Trinidad, from the time I reach St. Lucia and I move north because I work throughout the region, there is that hospitality really, really all-pervasive. You know, I think that understanding your role and your responsibility makes it relevant for us to recognize what tourism is, and then we understand the responsibility of sustainability. It was remiss of me to have not mentioned Melanesia Marshall, who is the Deputy CEO of the Tourism Authority in St. Kitts. And why I'm introducing with all of this, she has had a very unwavering dedication to tourism and the tourism industry, bringing to transformative and regenerative ways of being relevant. And so now I want to bring you on so that you can share your feelings on how we cultivate in our tourism landscape and how we champion diversity, equity, and inclusion in the way we manage our tourism.
Thank you, Richard. And of course, you're buying me lunch today. So Petra challenged us to throw away the script. And I do have a script because I'm an overachiever. And so I hate to go unscripted, but I also acknowledge the fact that we are all standing between lunch, and we really need to focus on what we need to get to today. So I'm going to try to be as succinct as possible. But let me first thank CTO for their invitation to be a part of this distinguished panel and join my colleagues. And I also want to express my gratitude to my Honorable Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Marsha Henderson, who is also Caribbean Journal's Minister of the Year, and our first elected female Minister of Tourism as well. So I am going to create my presentation in the form of a story. And everyone loves a good story. I'm sure we all read Nancy Drew and Harley Quinn when we were growing up. And so I want to tell you the story of embracing diversity and encouraging inclusiveness in the tourism sector in St. Kitts and Nevis. At the end of the story, I want you to remember, if there is nothing else, that there is value in diversity, and greater inclusivity will lead to a better chance of achieving sustainability. So let's get to the background of the story. In 2005, St. Kitts closed its sugar industry. And of course, that meant that we had all of our employees from the agriculture sector now having to transition to tourism. We got that? Okay, so that's the background of the story. Now, the setting. St. Kitts is what I like to call a hidden treasure, a nestled jewel in the Eastern Caribbean. And so as a destination that was very young in tourism, and with our visionary leader, the Honorable Terence Drew, he indicated that we must become a sustainable island state. And what he said is that achieving the goal of a sustainable island state necessitates a transformative tourism industry. We believe that tourism can be a powerful force for good, empowering our people and fostering positive change throughout our communities. Now, this is the essence of our Venture Deeper campaign. We launched the Venture Deeper campaign in 2022. And what it does is that it encourages visitors to fully immerse themselves in the destination, to partake in those people-to-people experiences, to enjoy our delectable cuisine. And as such, we have positioned ourselves as the eco-adventure capital of the world. And so I want you to now venture deeper into our setting, St. Kitts. Okay, so St. Kitts, venture deeper. We have our setting. Now let's talk about some of our characters and some of the things that were happening in terms of the conflict of the story. So let me just set the background by stating that key to our sustainability practices is the protection of our environment and the investment in the development of our local people. I like to say that in the beginning, there were two things that were created. One was the planet, and the other was? Okay, do we need to go back to the book of Genesis, people? I mean, come on. So let's go again. In the beginning, two things were created. One was the planet, and the other was? People, right? Okay, we got that. So we have now a responsibility to value these two things. Yes, there are other things that need to be valued, but we need to also value our people. We need to develop our people. We need to empower our people. Equity, education, and empowerment in tourism create a more inclusive and sustainable industry. By promoting equity, we ensure diverse voices and perspectives are valued, leading to innovative solutions and a richer tourist experience. Education gives our people the knowledge to develop their own businesses, and through empowerment, they can make meaningful contributions to sustainable efforts. Now, for St. Kitts and Nevis, this is a journey that has spanned 15 years. Now, let's get into the beginning, the characters, what we were experiencing. So as a result of the closure of the sugar industry, we had all of these individuals who now had to be transitioned into service. And that was not an easy task. As a matter of fact, it was very challenging. And so these are some of the things that we were faced with. Our stakeholder groups that were without formal education, because remember I said they were coming from agriculture and going into service. But they had a desire to start their own business. They had a dream. We also experienced numerous complaints from our visitors and international partners regarding our traditional and non-traditional service providers. They had a lack of industry knowledge. Poor customer service was also one of those things that we had to deal with. A stale product and lack of interagency collaboration. Now, with the goal of meaningful engagement, and this is where I want to ensure that we understand that working on the surface is not really going to bring change. We have to get into the minds of the people, into the hearts of the people, and convince them that what we are doing, they are a part of it, and they are really and truly stakeholders. And so as we ventured on to build some of these bridges, to bridge some of these gaps, we actually had to look at informal ways of educating our people. And so as we did that, we employed the tools of skill development, human capacity building, consistent service excellence training, and investment in businesses and PPPs. These were critical to moving these individuals from the mindset of, I am a detractor, to being, I am a valuable asset. Now, I already see the cue cards. So let's move it right along. And so the journey continued over 15 years. In 2009, we actually started with the recertification of our taxi and tour bus operators. Simultaneously, the Ministry of Tourism collaborated with Tourism Intelligence International to develop the groundbreaking Poor People, Poor Planet 5-year tourism strategy, firmly anchoring our future in sustainable practices. The next step engaged and empowered those who had the potential to offer unique services that could help us to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. We provided informal training and education, and these range from customer service to primate petting to the benefits of aloe in the case of the aloe rub vendors. And so it is through some of these PPPs, such as partnerships with Royal Caribbean Group, as well as the CTO, that we were able to really train and develop these individuals who once thought that they did not have a place in the tourism sector. And as a result of the engagement and empowerment, we were able to improve our people-to-people experiences. Our vendors were able to build their businesses, and so now they have businesses that they can pass on to their children. And I'm speaking specifically to the non-traditional sector. I'm not speaking about hoteliers or restaurant individuals. I'm speaking about ladies who are interested in braiding hair on the beach or even providing an aloe rub. And so as a result of that, they were able to add value to the destination. We were able then to achieve one of our sustainable development goals, which was to eradicate poverty, because many of these women were coming from single-parent homes, and they had these children. They had to find a way to earn their living and improve their livelihood. In addition, we were able to build a sustainable tourism product, and we were able to work at removing the gender inequalities. So before I wrap up, I want to basically reiterate this fact. There is value in the non-traditional. As we sit here today, it's important for us to challenge our biases. Look at individuals differently. Sometimes we are often so boxed into our own vision and thoughts of what we think things should look like, but there are persons out there who can add value if we just provide them with the tools and the necessary resources that they need. And at this time, I would like to share video of some of these individuals whom we have helped over the past 15 years.
St. Kitts believes that empowering its people is at the heart of its efforts to become a sustainable island state. The St. Kitts Tourism Authority, a pioneer in enhancing small business ventures within the tourism sector, has revolutionized the industry on the island. By providing training, structure, and guidance, we have empowered our non-traditional sectors within the industry and provided them with the opportunity to strive.
My name is Cynthia Archibald, #1 here bred at Port Zante. 32 years of service. Well, normally before the bands and the card, in order to raise your business, instead of you going to them and talking, you know, they might approach you by the board. Many times, like I do bread like 3-4 years ago, and then maybe the same person come back. I will approach them, here breading for you. They open their phone and they show me what I do 4 years ago. You know, I appreciate it a lot and then stuff like that. And there's where I get like customers, sometimes off of Facebook, you know, TikTok and different stuff like that because I post me care them and like, you know, raise them to everybody.
Our Alara vendors, hair braiders, primate petting vendors, and taxi and tour operators have improved their livelihoods through the opportunity provided to enhance their skill set and increase their knowledge of the industry. The annual mandatory Service Excellence Training Program covers everything from customer service, destination, and industry knowledge to the benefits and effective application of aloe and the proper care of monkeys. The ultimate goal is to create an environment that facilitates the healthy and sustainable growth of our small businesses in the future.
I'm Glenn. I'm a primate petting vendor. It's a job I'm happy to be doing. I'm doing this for the past 25 years. This job is about meeting people from all over the globe. Doing this job, you have to keep your standard as a professional. Situated with it was a very big experience for me. I had to meet a lot of stakeholders, and it was an experience. You have to know to convince to get the ship them to come to St. Kitts. If you can't convince them, you're not going to get them to come.
Through collaboration with our local, regional, and international partners, such as CTO and Royal Caribbean, the training offered to our people has allowed them to transform their lives and make meaningful contributions to the overall destination experience. Our hard work and dedication have garnered well-deserved recognition internationally as we have witnessed firsthand the impact our destination has on cruise ship itineraries. Join us in celebrating the success of our small business partners and the vibrant tourism industry they contribute to. St. Kitts, as a tourist destination, owes much of its success to the dedication and talent of these exceptional individuals, and we must celebrate them.
Thank you. And just as I wrap up, you know, while we've been here, St. Kitts has been awarded the Green Destination of the Year by the Caribbean Journal. And so we're very proud of this award, but we don't want individuals to feel as though we are greenwashing. That is not what this is about. Because tourism is the lifeblood of St. Kitts, and sustainability is paramount to everything that we do. I just want to thank you so much for indulging me. And as we move into the conference, please feel free for us to engage as we discuss a little further how we can continue to engage, educate, and empower our people. Thank you.
Absolutely fascinating, Melanicia. I have to get you lunch, okay? Yeah? Okay, what is really special about what she brought to the table, which is something that I'm very, very passionate about, is storytelling. I think that anecdotal transfer of values and beliefs and traditions are natural to us, and it's a relic of the West African griot tradition that we still have within us, which is just organic. And I believe in that. And I believe also in what she was talking about, true economic diversification, the income generating from non-traditional practice. That is part of the storytelling value of our culture. And so I'm very proud to be hearing this, and we must all borrow from that if we're not practicing it in other spaces. To continue with that storytelling practice, I want to bring Dr. Akula Lewis Cameron on. And one of the things that I looked at when she was the lead editor for a book that talks about moving from mass tourism, which is Sunlust, to a more sustainable and diverse model, which is Sun Plus. And I found that quite fascinating, a storytelling angle of how we are to view our tourism sector and how we are going to make a change. I want to give you a little story myself about how I feel about fashion, which is one of the areas I work in, because we always grew up thinking that Caribbean fashion was wearing a Hawaiian shirt, a Bermuda short, a Panama hat, and none of those geographic adjectives belong in the space per se. And so we have to really change the narrative, and celebrate our creative excellence and make the statement to the world of who we are and not follow suit, because those approximations of metropolitan values a lot of times square pegs in wrong holes, so we need to find our own methodology and challenge ourselves and champion the ways that belong to us. With that, I introduce Dr. Akula Lewis Cameron.
Thank you, Richard, and good afternoon, all. I want to continue the story that was started by my colleague and fellow panelist about this notion of empowering our people. And I want to premise this very short presentation on the point that nothing moves without the people. And that is something, of course, that we take with us. I'm speaking from the perspective of education, from academia, and we firmly believe that the Caribbean tourism industry cannot be sustainable, nor can it be competitive, if it is that our people do not have the requisite knowledge, skills, attitudes, and competencies in order for us to appropriately navigate the challenges that we face, as well as take advantage of the opportunities that will be before us. And so this afternoon, I just want to share with you briefly on two trends that impact us as a region. I want to talk a little bit about what are the requisite skills that we need as hospitality and tourism providers in order to respond to these trends, these two trends in particular. And then thirdly, I just want to speak to a call to action. What is it that is required on the part of both academia and industry and government in order for us to respond to these trends? And so the focus today really is on our future tourism providers must be green and we must be smart, right? And so I want to start first of all by, make sure I'm in there, right, okay. So I want to start first of all by speaking to this whole notion of smart tourism destinations, and I'm sure most of you would have heard the term bandied about destinations being smart. And I just want to note that technologically driven innovations have had a large impact on the development of the industry. And this whole move towards creating smart destinations is really about how do you integrate both the digital and the the digital and physical spheres of technology. And what we are after as islands in the Caribbean is to leverage technology and ICTs to create what we call smart experiences for our guests. And smart experiences which enhance the tourist experience through three things: through personalization, through context awareness, and through real-time monitoring. And so when we're talking about building out smart destinations, we're talking about the mainstreaming of technology, i.e. using the artificial intelligence, video analytics, virtual reality, mobile ordering, etc. And at the end of the day, we are looking to deliver augmented and knowledge-driven visitor experiences and, of course, to optimize spend. And, of course, one of the major drivers of this whole smart destination or smart tourist experience is the fact that our millennials and Gen Zs, they are steering travel trends with a focus on technology, sustainability, and that quest for a distinctive and meaningful experience. So that first trend is this whole notion of moving towards smart tourist destinations. The second trend I want to focus on is the whole concept of the greening of tourism. And by greening, this suggests that the sector must promote an economy that is low in carbon, resource efficient, stable, and reduces poverty while promoting, and we've heard this several times for the morning, social inclusivity. Whenever you hear the term greening of tourism, you always sort of refer to or you think about conservation efforts, but it's more than that. It includes that smaller ecological footprint, contribution to your nature protection goals, but also preservation of cultural heritage, social inclusion, creation of new business opportunities. And the drivers behind this include, of course, climate change, which we've heard a lot about from my colleague earlier, more responsible travel, and of course, we have the growth in specific niche markets, ecotourism, wellness tourism, and several different niches that focus on the greening of tourism. The question I want to pose to you as colleagues in industry and in government is, how green do you want to be? This whole notion of greening of tourism goes along a spectrum from light green to dark green. And so when you talk about being light, when you engage in light green tourism, this is the type of activities where you embark on an initiative to treat with an issue at the specific point in time. So for example, you decide you want to have a beach cleanup today, you decide that you want to give back to a community tomorrow, but very short-term type initiatives. And when we talk about dark green tourism, we're talking about those initiatives that have long-term impact. And so, as industry practitioners and as government, we have to make a decision, deliberate, conscious decision, how green do I want to be on that spectrum? And of course, depending on how green you want to be, and the other question about how smart is too smart, right? That question, of course, and I'm throwing questions for you to consider when you leave this conference, and the question really is, to what extent should we as Caribbean islands be smart but still maintain our islandness? And that's an important question that we have to consider, because as you hear more and more about embracing technological advancements and so forth, we also have to maintain that identity. And so when we think about responding to these trends about smart destinations and the greening of tourism, we have to determine the extent to which we want to embrace these initiatives, how smart and how green. And so specifically, in terms of the skills, and this is what I want to spend the next 3 minutes on, what are the skills required of our sustainable tourism provider as we respond to these trends? And I've listed here in terms of the smart skills, and I want you to look through this list, think about your own organization, and determine the extent to which these skills are evident in your tourism providers. Right? So we see the list here: digital literacy, digital skills, technology, proficiency, etc. And the thing about these skills is that they're scalable. So the intent really is not that all these skills are resident in all your employees, but you need to critically examine your colleagues to determine to ensure that across the system or across your organization, that these skills are captured in your staff. Because at the end of the day, what you're looking for is networks of connected people who can collaborate, cooperate, innovate, and co-create to become smarter. So you as the provider need to look at this list and determine what do you have, where are the gaps, and what do you need to focus on. Similarly, in terms of the green skills, some research that the university did just last year in the Caribbean, we did a comparison between the Caribbean, Germany, and Southern Africa. We did a survey among 120 students, industry practitioners, and educators to find out, but what are some of the key green skills that are required? And the top green skills were noted as tourism entrepreneurship, waste management, biodiversity, conservation, water conservation, cultural and heritage preservation, etc. The list is there. And what the research showed us was that the core areas that require the most attention are the areas of water conservation, energy conservation, biodiversity conservation, waste management, and tourism entrepreneurship. Interestingly, the research showed that these 4 areas of resource conservation are the least practiced in industry. And so there is a clear gap between, on the one hand, industry is not practicing it, and secondly, the employees do not have the requisite skills in order to support industry in that regard. And so the core areas we are looking at are the areas of conservation in terms of the gaps in the curriculum. Last thing has to do with this whole area of green competencies. And green competencies encompass that whole understanding of knowledge, skills, attitudes, behaviors, and awareness related to environmental sustainability. And there are 6 core green competencies that are required in any sustainable tourism provider. And it's listed there on the screen: green attitude, environmental consciousness, green knowledge, etc. And what our research found was that the 3 top competencies coming out of the findings are green awareness, green skills, and environmental consciousness as these 3 core areas that must be resident in any sustainability provider. So those are the skills that are required in terms of the future sustainable tourism provider. So what is the call to action? Colleagues, I want to indicate 2 main calls to action. 1, the tourism industry, i.e. industry practitioners, must become a catalyst for regeneration. The only way that we can move the needle in terms of becoming more sustainable is that our people must be smart and our people must be green. And in order for our people to be smart and green, it means that the industry providers have to create that environment in order for persons to adopt these particular skills. Secondly, the tourism sector employers and entrepreneurs must reposition and deepen their relationships with the local education and training provider institutions. And that's a quote that came directly from the recent Regional Human Resource Development Skills Audit that was done by the CTO recently. Right? There has to be a deeper partnership between academia and industry if we are to ensure that our people are ready to take us to the next level. And of course, on the part of academia, tourism industry providers, we of course must reshape the curriculum to ensure that we incorporate these skills into what we do. So what is on the screen there is just, and I'm looking at my time, what is on the screen there is just a list of some of the core areas that are required on the part of providers and academia. Definitely invest in education and skills development, that was mentioned earlier, cross-disciplinary learning, ensuring that your staff exposure, that was mentioned earlier as well. Experiential learning opportunities, promote lifelong learning, and just a couple ideas there to share. But in closing, I just want to put it to you to consider how smart is too smart, how green do you want to be. Ensure that our people are appropriately equipped in order to take us to the next level. Thank you.
I like dark green, whether it's forest green, moss green, emerald green. I love it. So the green competency, I definitely love that whole thrust, and it's all speaking to the same brand identity that I started off talking about, which is given invigoration by our innovativeness and our competitiveness. I love also the reference to being more targeted, more quantifiable, more achievable, more realistic and relevant, and certainly more timely, and the deliberate action to move transformationally and regeneratively the tourism sector. Okay, so now I move on to Amrita Bala of AB Consulting. She has a history of luxury hospitality industry practice, and she is going to share how she has navigated through various cultural landscapes and fostered strategic leadership and effective governance, which will now manifest itself in how we rationalize our tourism.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon. Good afternoon to my esteemed panelists, lovely presentations, and many thanks to the CTO for the opportunity to be here with all of you, and to obviously the Grenada team as well. It's wonderful to be here, and it's my first time in Grenada, so it's absolutely breathtaking. As Richard mentioned, I'm going to be talking a little bit around sustainable leadership and sustainable employment practices, as it relates to the people discussion. And, let's see if we can, a little bit of background here, but our company, AB Consulting, has deep expertise in HR, obviously, and we've done a lot of work. My passion is training and education, and we've done a lot of work in the Caribbean, in Turks and Caicos, and Cayman Islands, Bermuda, St. Lucia, hopefully Grenada soon too. And what I wanted to do was really talk to you a little bit around this concept of sustainable leadership. And my goal today is to also bring you some real live examples of projects that are happening or have happened in the Caribbean through some live case studies. Hopefully this will work. So this concept of sustainable leadership comes up, and we've been so lucky today to hear from Prime Minister Mitchell. We've been very lucky to hear from Adam as well. And it's interesting, after his presentation, I actually just walked up to him and said, may I just take all the sound bites from your presentation about sustainable leadership? So there's a lot of great things to quote from, but first and foremost, and he also really touched on this point, is what is sustainable leadership, right? And the first point I'd like to make on this topic is it's purely something that comes from the heart. It's also a learned skill. It's about how we as leaders in this room are governing ourselves, but it's also how we are supporting leaders in our organizations to take a different viewpoint on what leadership should look like. And there are three elements here. Partnership, we heard a lot about that earlier this morning around the partnership with the public sector and the private sector, partnership with our employees, partnerships with our guests. What is our purpose? And sustainable leadership also takes a fair bit of courage. It's about doing things differently, and it's about thinking differently. It's about thinking about the world on a larger scale. Being an entrepreneur myself, I also work a lot with entrepreneurs, and so entrepreneurs in the hospitality business, and I always say to them, as you're starting your business and you're thinking about your business plan, what's your give back, right? What's your give back to your community? How are you going to support your community? Right? This isn't about donations, but it's about active partnerships and engagement, which is really a lot about where sustainable leadership also comes in. And courage. This is not the mainstream manifesto right now as it relates to leadership, but certainly an area that's up and coming. And when we do a lot of our work in executive coaching and leadership, we really encourage leaders to think about the bigger purpose beyond the organization. So, what does it look like? And many of these practices we've heard about, but when we talk about sustainable leadership, it's really about long-term vision. You know, what's happening in the world, what's happening in our communities, where's the need? How do we support the need? What are the balancing priorities? So often people will say, well, leadership and sustainability, I don't know, about, you know, profit versus environment, profit versus people. Well, this is the balance in the bottom line, right? How are we going to be taking a look at economic prosperity, our environmental responsibilities, and the social responsibilities? There's also a stakeholder focus. So again, being in the tourism and hospitality industry, it's about looking at our employees, it's about looking at our guests, right? It's about looking at partnerships, both in private and public sector as well. How do we innovate? And we've heard from some the panelists here and earlier, there's some great innovations that are happening in this space. And how do you lead by example? It has to come from the heart. So, sustainable employment practices. I often get asked this question, well, what does this mean? Is this about beach cleanups? Is this about environmental responsibility? It's all those things, and it's so much more. And this definition of sustainable employment practices is fluid. It's growing, it's evolving, and it has many, many different buckets associated with it. So what are some of these initiatives like? And many of these are happening in a number of hotels and resorts that I work with. It's happening through the tourism sector. And if anything, I would say this is kind of a list for us to think about. The first is work-life balance initiatives. And what this looks like is remote work, compressed work weeks, flexible work arrangements. The hotel industry is a 24/7 industry. I have leaders saying to me and general managers, well, how am I going to do a compressed work week? And I said, you're going to have to start thinking about scheduling a little bit differently based on the needs of your employees, right? If people have young children and they have parents, they're going to need a different kind of flexibility than, say, a younger employee. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all anymore. And a lot of properties that I know are starting to take a look at flexible work schedules, wellness programs, anything and everything to do with our emotional health and our mental health. This is a core priority, not just for HR leaders, but for organizations in general. My passion, employee training and development, of course. You heard again this morning from Adam about all the work that Sandals is doing in terms of their partnership with FIU, but also the fact that they're going to be setting up their own hospitality school. How we continue to support and develop our people is going to be critical. DEI, and again, this is a large topic, and you're very lucky you're going to have Christopher that's going to be talking to you about this shortly. But it's really about how we build inclusive cultures and workspaces here. Employment practices, as it relates, also takes a look at what are the environmental initiatives. You know, what are our waste and energy management programs? Are we, as a property, are we recycling? Are we looking at energy efficiency? Are we looking at that as we're building new hotels? A lot of jurisdictions in the Caribbean have mandated this now for any new builds and new products as well. Supporting sustainable transportation. I have a client that now has electric buses that they use to help transport their employees to their particular resort. And they've started to give credits to people that are biking to work as well. Community engagement, whether that's charities that you're working with or you have a special interest group, whether it's youth, whether it's education, there's so many different avenues here. And then the one that also really is probably one of the most important ones is fair wages and benefits, and the one that requires the most amount of work when we look at sustainable employment practices. Are people getting paid a fair wage? And really what I hear a lot is that that needs to keep up with inflation, right? That needs to keep up with changing economic times. But every individual has a right to a fair wage and benefits, right? And I realize that that's also driven a lot by jurisdiction. Okay, so I wanted to take some time, and we talked a little bit about theory, is what's happening on the ground. And most of these examples are from clients of mine that were very open and willing for me to share, and a couple I've just gathered through some research as well. So I'd like to start with Turks and Caicos. Minister Connolly and I were talking at the break. So I have a pleasure of working with a company called Grace Bay Resorts. They have a number of properties in Turks and Caicos. And I sat down with their head of HR and I said, listen, let's talk about what's happening and some of these initiatives we worked on together. They recently implemented a wellness day for all their managers. This is a post-COVID initiative. They found when they were closed during COVID, a lot of their employees started to discover their passions, right? Whether they learned sailing, whether they learned this particular craft. So they have and are encouraging all their managers to take off 1 day a week. And it's up to the manager, and it's fully endorsed to do whatever it is that they love. Some of them have started side businesses, right? And they're scheduling accordingly. They've done diversity training. And what's so great, they've actually just hired a sustainability manager in their HR team. I loved hearing that, whose job will really be to help monitor this. They also have a community foundation where they give back to underprivileged schools. They're teaching the younger generation on the world of chefdom. In Bermuda, we have the Hamilton Princess and Beach Club. Again, their sustainability initiatives is to buy local, to support local. They have a wonderful employee vegetable garden. Employees love this, and they use the produce from the vegetable garden to cook for the employee cafeteria. It's lovely, actually. They have a great company they've partnered with, which is called Eco Spirits. So local Bermudian rum is all now delivered through Goslings in these Eco Spirits bottles. They actually invested in this to give water bottles to their team. There's a historic ship deliverance in St. George's in Bermuda for anyone that's been there, and so the teams have gone out there to do work on helping restore. They partner with Big Brothers and Big Sisters in the Adult Education School, as well as the Women's Resource Center. Another group, Soho House. Now, they have a broader platform, and so in Canouan, we've done some work with Soho House, and they have a huge commitment to ESG, and some of the work that they do is around mentorship programs, fellowship, and Soho Talent. This is in Soho House, Canouan, but broadly applied. And then closer to home, Grenada. I wanted to share some success stories here because there's some wonderful work happening. You'll be hearing from Mr. Barry Collimore, but certainly Wish Grenada, the West Indies School of Hospitality, and the partnership with Mount Cinnamon. I'm excited to learn more about this, and they've partnered with eCornell and the Culinary Institute of America, a great program in terms of giving back from an education perspective to the community as well. Another great property here, True Blue Bay Boutique Resort. They've got regular beach cleanups. They've got Earth Day, Earth Hour celebrations. I'm sure something fabulous is happening today there as well. They have a green team, and they have electric buses used to transport guests and staff. So, you know, what I really wanted to leave you with is that the Caribbean, you know, continues to have a very unique opportunity to lead in sustainable business practices. And part of that, and when you're looking at people practices, it's about taking a look at employment well-being, employees' well-being, and taking a look at environmental responsibility, and certainly partnering with the local community wherever and however you can. I think I'm in the time mark there, so thank you all for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Amrita. So it's no longer one size fits all. It's dynamic, it's evolving, it's flexible. I liked how she spoke to the sustainable leadership. It's something that you have to cultivate. It's a use of creative intelligence to come up with sustainable leadership, and it must be sustaining employee action. I love the partnership, purpose, and the passion that evolves into a courage to be risk-taking. And I think that is how it's going to change, so we don't just fall in a groove. I want to move on to our last speaker, professional consultant, coach, and trainer, who works in cross-cultural communications, business development, and he has honed his skills in customer experience and conflict resolution while building relationships. A creative practitioner himself. Let me present to you Christopher Lee.
So I love how they left probably the hungriest person for last. So if I rush through this, it's part maybe nervous, but also because I'm very hungry, so I'll also keep it brief. The good thing I have as well is that a lot of my fellow panelists have done part of the legwork for me, because this area, and as Rosana said, is also seemingly a buzzword, but at the heart of it is really about people and planet and looking at the values that we have. So I want to start, because I always believe in coming from a place of abundance, first giving my flowers to the panelists, to the work you've done, and to your presentations. To the lovely people of Grenada as well, and to the indigenous people that we are on their lands, and also to each one of you for the work that you are doing in your own individual capacity, because you are the ones that are leading the way, because you can see that you have that commitment to people and to planet. So give yourselves a round of applause. Let's start there. And I'm just going to get my presentation to start. Down. Sure. No worries. That's okay. Well, since while we're waiting on the presentation as well, I'm going to also echo something that Christopher said earlier about just taking a look into the room and just recognizing the gender diversity, the racial diversity, and just the diversity overall in the Caribbean. And you're going to see a bit of slide about who I am, but I just want to start with the fact that who I am is a person that's very passionate about people, is very passionate about those linkages, and also very passionate about the planet. And so I want you to keep that in mind when I speak about this presentation, because DE&I is really about that inclusion component and considering every stakeholder, every living being that helps us to look towards how to build sustainable prosperity. Yeah? We're hungry, guys. Come on, let's go. I know, the delay. So here's what, I'm not throwing it away, but I'm modifying it, because I think that a lot of that philosophy, yeah? We're good to go? No? Okay, sure. No, it's just a blank screen right now. So the thing about that is that a lot of the philosophy with inclusion, and I think that there's a lot of stickiness around DE&I, and one of the things when I was speaking to Amanda when it comes to this conference is, how are we going to localize that information to understand that there are a lot of different structures and components that are in DE&I, but how do we bring that to the Caribbean context? Because we have a lot of different components that we need to address within our own community. So I have a little bit of a quick assignment for you. If this would go forward, down. Yeah, down, right? This is down. I know down. I went to UE, so I know I got a good education. Sure, okay. So I guess the first thing to start off the bat, you've heard a little bit about what DE&I is about. You heard about the importance when it comes to leadership and sustainability, how a big part of that is creating inclusive spaces and inclusive care. But just from a read of the room, what else do you know about DE&I? And you could just shout it out. You don't have to raise your hand. What does it mean to you, just in one word? Acceptance, okay, keep it going. Anything else? I'm trying to wake you up because I know you're hungry, but I'm a very interactive person, so I want you to help me along. So what other words can come to mind? Ted? Perspective, great. Okay? Access, great. Respect, fantastic. So, sorry, say again? Violence. Balance. I was like, violence, I don't know what that. So, so all of these are what do they all say when you bring them together? There are a lot to speak about our values. And so when we think about a sustainable approach, when we think about building for the future, we have to focus on what do our values say. And so in the midst of this conference, it's about looking at the values from a people and planet-centered approach. And the moment you do that is when you can create something that is sustainable because you're taking all these different stakeholders in mind. So outside of that, within DE&I, there's a shift because, there's a lot of, just like this conversation. We have conversations, we chat, we talk about these nice things, but the same way that the Caribbean has come to be where it is, whether through positive or not so positive historical context, a lot of that impact is through systems. And so with DE&I, a lot of it is looking at systemic change. So I want to go back to this other part I had done all this for you. Right, okay. So I'll be quick because I'm going to skip it forward. So one of the things, because it's so sticky, when you look at this title, what's one word that comes out of that? Because you're hearing respect, you're hearing about people, you're hearing about accessibility. What's the key theme that comes through all of this? Say it louder. Louder. I know you're hungry, man, but gee. So one of the things that I did when I looked at the mottos of all the different Caribbean countries is when you talked about going back to our values and building a sustainable approach, is that most of the countries look at aspects of unity, all achieving, forward, upward, and onward together. So it's something innate in us already. And echoing the sentiments of Adam is that the Caribbean is full of diversity. And the Caribbean has all the talent that it needs, but there's a bit more digging deep that we need to do. And so, let's go here. So when we talk about digging a little deeper, it's thinking about we understand what have we done before, and what are some of the different traditional approaches that we've taken. But obviously that's only getting us to a certain point. So as you've heard from the different folks in the room, with the different information, it's about how do we start to think about doing something differently. And within inclusion work, a lot of it is asking those questions. First, can we do it a bit differently? And then also with inclusion, it looks a lot at bias. So I can imagine, let's use a simple example of the Prime Minister of Grenada. I'm sure that when he went up to go for this position, there was a bit of age bias in there, correct? I think if we bring it into the perspective of tourism, I know that there is, because again of our colonial past, there are certain biases when it comes to race and when it comes to placing value judgments on what we perceive as a tourist. Okay, and I'm just calling it out as it is. But the good thing is, in listening to the people into this room and listening to the information that's coming forward, and when you look at people like Adam Stewart and you look at the Prime Minister, you're seeing that change. So you know that it's happening. But how can we be a lot more intentional? How can we look to deconstruct and decolonize these different concepts that we've been operating with, and not throwing necessarily the baby out with the bathwater, because there are a lot of systems that have worked in some ways, but it's not necessarily reflective of what we need to do to move forward. And so when you look to break down, because again, the theme of our panel is breaking barriers, so that's a lot to do with that decolonizing and deconstructing concept, but it's also about building bridges. And when you think about building bridges with different communities, you really have to understand them. So because I want to really get into the what's in it and how does this relate to us, why does this all matter? Again, trying to focus with our purpose being on that people and planet approach. And again, as many people have said in this conference so far, it's looking at the partnerships. I think I've spoken to quite a number of folks here that were like, I want to see what the insights are. I want to see what to do more. But I've also heard people saying, we know what we need to do. The information is there. Yes, of course, we do need to get more information as well, but we have the tools to start. And we've started already, but how do we intentionally and systemically build those systems up so that it becomes long-lasting? So I'm going to just fast forward straight to the track. Where do we go from here? So again, DE&I is very sticky, and yes, you hear a lot of these buzzwords about inclusive practices, inclusive management, looking at valuing the diverse lenses of the different people in the room. And that's a big part of what we do at the firm and what I am passionate about. It's really about connecting with people that want to create transformational change and putting them in the spaces to create that impact. And so that is so crucial to the way that we're looking to build not just tourism, but our societies. Because what the hope is that through creating these systemic systems in terms of education and sensitization of understanding the people-centered approach, through creating these systems of the planet-centered approach, and it becomes a part of just our everyday philosophy and not just something you do for fun. And I think we were having a discussion with Rutan Mayan about D&I being a tick box, very performative. That's not what this is about. We're trying to go deeper, as Adam said earlier, right? Again, not just throwing away the script, but modifying it, because I think the Caribbean has a lot to offer. And I also want to, when we come about decolonizing, deconstructing those concepts too, when we think about people-centered approaches, people not just being people here in the room. Our people is everyone. The people that are in the room are allies. The people here that are committed to seeing our region develop and our people develop. And another big set of our people that I think is another area that we don't tap into enough is looking at our diaspora. So, oh, fantastic, good. So where do we go from here? I want your key takeaways is we're looking first at education and sensitization. In this area of inclusion, it's a lot about getting more and more data, because the data helps us to make better informed decisions. Then from that, creating systemic change in our organization. So in my line of work, a lot of what we do is helping people through that process. So something as simple as not putting a accessibility clause in a job ad, you don't realize how much that automatically discriminates against persons with accessible needs. Or in the case of Melnesia, how many times that we look to leverage our talent and we talk about our people, but we overlook the people that don't have maybe formal education and have the skill sets. That's another aspect of our decolonization that we need to look at as well. And the last part about it really is about working and valuing every single person's diverse lived experience, whether it is someone that's local, because we do have the talent locally, but then we also have folks like myself that go between the Caribbean and overseas, and we can bring back that knowledge. And then again, working with those allies as well, because all of it at the end of the day is finding that alignment. So if the alignment is an alignment of, and again in my work, it's an alignment of technical ability, yes, but the alignment of values. And so where that really centers itself around, going back to this title again about unity, is really a focus on building community. And I think that's really where we need to put our heart into the work we do, but not just do it in terms of speaking, because again, everyone has said that it's not just about the talk, it's about getting the right information, building those partnerships, and creating those systems to make effective change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christopher. I think the issue of intentionality and deconstructing concepts to forge a new way for our tourism sector is really critical. I want to point out that I started off by saying that in Trinidad we don't necessarily follow some of the methodologies. One of the things that our tourism department looked at in the last year, and I was taken on as a consultant, was festival development. Looking at the multicultural space that we have in Trinidad, that is what our tourism lure has to be, more than probably sand, surf, and sea, and other things like that. And one of the things is that everyone spoke to the fact that people who are in the trenches have to be involved in the decision-making and in the policy change to create a more sustainable tourism product. What we have attempted to do is to cultivate tourism landscape in our dialogue this afternoon here. In the Caribbean that champions diversity, equity, and inclusion, fostering empowerment and sustainable development for all stakeholders through innovative education, community engagement, and people-centric strategies. I am just going to pull one question and hope that we can get like a one-liner or a two-liner, because I want to engage you for a closing. And I had a few questions, but I'm just pulling one. In your experience with tourism product development, how do you envision leveraging innovation and creativity to not only showcase the unique cultural and natural assets of the Caribbean, but also ensure that tourism offerings are accessible and appealing to a wide range of visitors, including those from underrepresented demographics? No, it's all there, it's all there. It just sounds windy and long, but it's all there. It's all there if you listen. So I'm opening it up so that each person can get an opportunity to pull from it. I am not saying that you have to answer to all of the things. I'm opening up the discussion. So you grab at one of them and you comment. So I'll say it again. Let me see my thing now. I planned this question, you know. All right. In your experience with tourism product development, how do you envision leveraging innovation and creativity to not only showcase unique cultural and natural assets of the Caribbean, but also ensure that tourism offerings are accessible and appealing to a wide range of visitors, including those from underrepresented demographics and marginalized communities? Okay. My boss question, well, they want to cut me out of saying. Now we can start. Christopher, we're starting with you, and we come down this way.
You put me right into the frying pan now. Just come from that in this. So again, just kind of in line with a lot of what we've been talking about, just acknowledging first those different groups, because it's in calling it out, recognizing that everyone does have that diversity and these different communities do have value. So that's the first step for me. I think when it comes to accessibility and again, looking at diversity is also understanding that even though we segment a lot of our visitors in terms of country, there are also different subgroups within those groups. And so the core component of it is that it's connecting those people with those experiences. And we all know that, again, as Adam says, the customers have a choice, right? And so what is it that is drawing them here? It's because they're connecting with the people and the community and the culture. And so again, if we just continue to keep that people, planet, and community approach, I think that's how the by at large will look about increasing that accessibility, because people will feel by creating these inclusive spaces, I feel more welcomed here. By looking at inclusive language as well, that really helps, because then people start to see themselves and say that we're being mindful and taking them into consideration. And yeah, and then the end result will be the prosperity, but it's all funded in those value systems that we have. Thank you.
Very eloquently stated, thank you. I think for me, really, I would stress the importance of communication. Communication with your employees, communication with your guests, and representation. You heard this morning that we have, multi-generational guests, visitors. People want to see representation in where they're gonna stay. I want to know that it's family friendly because I have a 9-year-old son. I want to know certain things. I want to know about safety. I want to know about kids clubs offerings. There's different needs, so it's about really adapting and showcasing that. Also, I'm a huge proponent. You're going to be hearing a lot on this topic tomorrow around AI and using AI as a supplementary tool. It's in my work every day, but using it as a communication tool, using it as a tool to help generate innovation, this is really where the future is, both for employees, for guests. So that would be my contribution there.
I think for me, the one word is people want to connect. And our visitors want to connect with us, the Caribbean people, who have a story to tell. And I think it's important going forward that we use technology in a way that allows that connection to take place and to give our people the opportunity to tell that story, not just through our sun, sand, and sea, but to tell that story through our festivals, through our heritage, through our sport, through the range of offerings that we have in the Caribbean.
Thank you. I'm going to attempt to answer Richard's essay by going back to an experience in St. Kitts. We create products and businesses to meet a need. And so as we look at the needs of the visitors, then it equals to product development. Because if there's a need, then we must find a product to meet that need. Now, in St. Kitts, when the visitors come to the island and they go to any Caribbean destination, they often get sunburned, right? And so we were able to link that with the opportunity of the vendors to create something that will assist with the need for managing the sunburn for our visitors. And so that is where the idea came up of the aloe rub vendors. And so because we were able to pair the two together and they were able to use their natural resources and their creativity, then that became accessible to our visitors and a need was met.
It was a very intense question, Richard. There are a few things that came to mind with the question, and it may have been because you started with Trinidad and Tobago and the festivals. And one of the things that I was just looking at, and a colleague spoke to me about, was in the Canary Islands. I'm sure everybody is aware, thousands of people are protesting mass tourism. I think if the innovation and creativity that we are seeking does not include the community that Christopher spoke to, and does not understand that the people living here have to also be a part of the product offering, you are going to have a conflict between your guests who are coming from other spaces and the people who reside within these spaces. And we have to start creating and innovating with ourselves in mind as well, taking the innovations that come from our grandparents, that come from beyond those grandparents, and think, where do we want it to go? Not only what do people want to see.
A fine for my essay question. We got it sparked a most brilliant discourse to close. Okay, so in my little conclusion that I have here now, nurturing diversity, fostering equity, ensuring inclusion, and advancing education within the tourism sector in the Caribbean is not only a moral imperative, but also a strategic necessity. By embracing these principles and prioritizing people-centric approaches, we can empower individuals, drive sustainable development, and create a tourism industry that benefits all stakeholders, both now and for generations to come. I hope I have been an investigative correspondent in unearthing long-term regenerative and transformational tourism sector development that is sustainable. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, lots of challenges were thrown out here in the first two sessions for today, Planet and People. And I won't keep you any longer because we are definitely at, the needle is on empty and we need to fill you back up because we have more information to share with you on your return from lunch. So we are now at, and you might say my watch is fast, but we are about 20. Does everybody have 20 to? Two about that? So my challenge to you, they gave you challenges. I have a challenge. I need you back here within the hour so that we could start on the dot. Okay, so 20 to 3. That's it. Great. So thank you again. Please, let's put our hands together for our moderator and our presenters for sessions 2 and 1. Thank you once again and see you back in a bit. Oh, to let you know, do you know where no, you don't know where the lunch is, and you're moving. Okay, so, well, there are going to be some ushers on the outside that will take you across to the Radisson restaurant. It's just adjacent to the pool. So we'll have some folks out there that will show you on your way. It's a little walk across the area there, the courtyard, okay? See you back soon. Guys, thank you.